now I should start over explaining this because I didn't think to turn my mic on. So, it's about 4 p.m. according to my clock, and this code hasn't finished compiling yet. But the plan for today is we're going to do what I've been calling in my head the kind of a web dev for hackers type stream. So there's... nope, that sound is still on. There we go. That's a annoying feature there. I know I complain about this almost every week, that in order to start a stream on YouTube, I have to preview it on YouTube, which of course plays the sound for me, except with whatever delay is, and it means I end up hearing myself. So, like I was explaining before I interrupted myself there, the plan for today is to do some web dev, because there's a lot of things I want to do, and that I've wanted to do historically, that I can't do without some sort of a good front end. And at least for some of it, a good front end is your browser. You already have all of these nice little buttons here, like this entire interface, which is the, YouTube chat interface, is very well put together. Everything is set up, it's relatively clean to do. There's just a lot of work that goes into actually learning how to do that. So while the past couple weeks I've ended up having to miss being able to stream for various reasons, I've been reading up on how to do that in the modern sense of things. And the reason I emphasize modern there is because, 10 years ago, trying to think, do some math here. 10 years ago, I might have understood how to do web development. 15 years ago, I could, kind of do it. Like I knew some PHP. I understood how HTML and CSS worked, and maybe a very little bit of JavaScript. And 15 years ago, that was probably good enough. And if you're familiar with the field now, it does not look like that at all. If you've looked at how things work nowadays, generally you're like 4 different frameworks in. I've got 2 different package managers running. Like, web development now looks absolutely nothing like when I actually kind of understood it. So I spent a little while here, I've been researching things, and the plan today is to hopefully build a relatively simple app using React. And I have no idea if React is the best thing to do this in. What I do know is that when I look around on the internet, React seems reasonably popular, and it's something that I was actually able to understand when I read through a couple tutorials. So the purpose of all of this is we're going to do... I should get my mouse in the right window here. Kind of just a stream of me doing web development with this stuff and stumbling around quite a bit, because while I've worked through a couple tutorials for a lot of this stuff, I'm nowhere near an expert in it. So there's going to be quite a bit of looking up in the manual how exactly to do a thing. What we're doing right now is the first step of that. So if you were like me and you assumed that if you're doing web development, the first step was to open up, your text editor of choice, put in, your nice HTML tag, a head, a body, put in some JavaScript. Yeah, that's not how that works at all. Apparently, if you're going to make a website in 2017, the first step to do is you install Nodejs and the Nodejs package manager, which is a little weird to me. But the biggest issue here is that you can't just go download Node.js, at least not if you're using the environment I have here. So I've talked about this on stream a few times, but the environment I use for streaming and CTFs and most things now is I have a Windows 10 machine. It's Windows 10, like actual Windows 10. and I use a combination of Hyper-V VMs running pretty modern Ubuntu and WSL, which is what this window here is. If you're not familiar with it, WSL is a Ubuntu-based Hyper-V thing that gives me essentially a native Ubuntu layer in Windows that I can just use. It's not quite as high performance as having a native install would be, but it does most things about as well as I would want. The problem is that the version here is 1604, and at least my experimentation with it, the version of Node.js that I can get is like Node 4. And if you notice the directory I'm in here, the current version of Node is Node 9. And again, not an expert here, but everything that I saw said that if I'm going to do this, I need to get a modern version and use that instead. So for the past about half hour now, I've been pulling down the source code, building it from source, and installing it. And luckily, we're just about finished with that. So, we have this, we have it installed. Supposedly I should be able to do a npm. That looks good. I probably want to do a sudo npm-g. That's a global install. And I'm going to do npm-g install create React app. And we're going to let this run for a little bit. So what we're doing here is we're installing React and some of the other things. And React, well, React is one of several billion JavaScript frameworks. And they're all different. I honestly cannot wrap my head around most of them. But for the most part, for React, it's pretty simple. Like, this is some kind of syntax that I can understand. I'm going to render a thing. I'm going to have a hello message. I'm passing in an argument. Oops. Passing in an argument. It's going to go over here. Like, this is stuff that makes sense to me. So that's why we're using React. And when we get into it, there's a backend, which is going to use Flask for API stuff, but we can deal with that in a little bit. So this worked. This is more or less where we want to be. Where did I put this thing? Oops. Users streaming. Right. So if you've been following along for a while now, we were doing this whole always be fuzzing thing, which is basically a fuzzer that I've been wanting to make for a while, or parts of a fuzzer that I've always wanted to be doing for a while, which is just have stuff running constantly. Even if it's slow, it's fine. But I want to be able to easily interact with how the fuzzer works, which is why all of this came up. I want to be able to have a front end that a human can look at and say, here is a crash dump. I want to do a little bit of exploration in that crash dump and be able to just click a box that says, yes, I think this is exploitable. Or no, I do not think that's exploitable. So for bitcode, I was talking about WSL. So that's the, of course you can't Google for it. It's the Windows subsystem for Linux. It's been around for a while, but here's the link to it. It's, I find it incredibly useful. It gives me a native Linux on my Windows desktop, which is basically the best of all the worlds of what I want. Like I was saying, the intention here is I'm going to build, hopefully, a front end, which is some nice JavaScript and some CSS. We're going to, well, let's actually draw this out real quick. So this is the wonderful design tool of choice, that is MS Paint. And when all of this is done, what I'd like to have here, let's use a real tool. Right. So the idea is that I definitely want to be able to integrate a lot of things here. And this is just the very first step of this. Fuzzer front end, and we're going to call this, we're going to put some more text over here, crash dump analysis. And when it comes to the actual display, I need a box over here, which is going to be, so this is going to be populated by a crash dump of some sort. The ones we currently have are mini dumps from fuzzing an ancient version of Internet Explorer, which is going to be the start of this, but the plan is to extend this quite a bit. I'm hoping in the not too distant future to have this working with some of the Python fuzzing we did quite a while back. But we're going to have to get there before we can do much more there. So we want a box over here on the right, which is the register state. And underneath that, I want to have... let's think about this for a second. So we've got register state like that, which seems fine. I'd like to have a box here for some disassembly. And then we're going to have over here, ideally, a memory dump. And for the memory dump to work, we need to be able to point it at a different location. So we're going to have this, which is a go-to memory. And that seems good. We're going to move that over here a little bit. And now the last thing we need to have here is underneath. So first off, do we want it underneath it or not? I think these sizes look reasonable enough. They're not quite to scale. So my plan here is that we're going to use Bootstrap eventually for all the CSS-y stuff to be able to lay all this out. And when that works, we're going to have that uses a 12-column format. So this is going to be, if it's 12 columns, this would be 6, this would be 3, this would be 3. Mind you, I'm making all these claims and not quite as confident as I hopefully sound, by which I mean not that confident at all, that my numbers are correct. But that's the idea. Now, we also need an interface to get feedback back from a user. If we've presented, here's a crash dump, tell me if this is exploitable, I need a good way to get somebody to say, yes, this is exploitable. And I think for the first version of this, it's going to be just completely dead simple. It's going to be a box with, come on, get out of there, 3 buttons in it. And that's going to be exploitable. It's going to be not exploitable. And it's going to be, I don't know. You know, dead simple, right? Like, I either looked at it and I thought this was exploitable, I looked at it and I thought it was not exploitable, or I just didn't understand it all. And there's a number of reasons why. So one thing that I want to be clear about, I don't know is hopefully not a common answer, but it's very much an answer that I would expect to see relatively often. And the reason for that is because the information I'm giving here, the memory dump, the disassembly, and the register state, while that's some information, it's definitely not everything. Like, this cannot capture the entire state, especially if the memory dump is missing anything. While I think most of our crash dumps have everything, it's not that uncommon to end up with a core dump or something where one of the sections wasn't captured because it wasn't configured to get captured properly or something like that. And if we end up in that, then, well, you kind of throw your hands up and you say, I don't know. So, in general, I think this is about the design we're going to try and go for, with the note that in the future, I want to make this box down here more complicated. I want to be able to do like tagging so that you're not just saying it's exploitable, it's a use after free. Like, you think it's a use after free, or you think it's, a stack-based buffer overflow, or whatever it is. I can say it's exploitable for this reason, or it's not exploitable because it's a null deref, or it's not exploitable because, like, be able to give reasons and things like that. But this looks like a good first step. Importantly, this is all going to be driven through a JSON API that we're going to write too. I don't think we have any of the pieces for that done yet. We were working on them last stream and didn't get as far as I would have liked, and it's been a while, so we'll worry about doing all that later. So this needs to dynamically update from API off bottom box. So basically, when I go to memory, and let's put a button for that while we're at it. Button. When I click go there, I expect it to update this box, go out to the API, request a chunk of memory, display it to me. Disassembly, I think, is going to be more or less static. And that's not perfect. So a great example of why this is going to be imperfect and why I don't know is going to come up more than I'd like. As an example of a crash we could get, let's suppose our crash is because we're reading from a controlled address and we only get, 12 instructions past that, but we don't know, like, we read from an address we control. That might still be exploitable if just off the display we have here, it's then going to write to that address. So it's not perfect. It's good enough, though, for now. One last thing that's important here to note is that, let's use this box right here. So these should be populated from the first call. Oops, let's make that red. And I want a new box. This one is going to update separately. So we need two different pieces to actually pull data in off our API. But I think this looks decent. Like, this looks more or less like how I want it to look. So let's take this. We're going to save this. This is our design. I have no idea where this got to. So the one downside to using WSL for this, oh, there it is that while it mostly works, so there's the Windows file system and then the Linux file system, and they don't exactly play well together. The Linux side can see the Windows side. The Windows side cannot see the Linux side. So depending on where I saved that, I may or may not actually be able to get to it, but I did save it someplace I can get to. So here's our design. We're going to put this over here so I don't have to worry about it for right now. And we need to write the stupidest, most simple API for this, which is going to be, we're just going to serve up more or less static JSON for this. So we have a test server here. We're going to, oh no, I'm gonna have to look this up. See, I thought I would be able to do the Flask part of it without having to look it up, but I need to actually look up how the right syntax for this. So I don't want to import Flask. I want to from Flask import Flask. App is equal to Flask. App.route. So slash, we want it to just an API, go away. We want to have app.route. So since we're trying to be a little bit quick with a lot of this stuff, we want an API. We want two endpoints for now, which is dump slash ID slash. So dumps slash ID slash state. And then we also want to have, oh, and this is not right. That is a colon where I don't want a colon. App.route dumps ID memory adder. And these are the two routes we need. And for people who aren't familiar with Flask, just a quick rundown here. So I need to actually define these. And this is going to be return. We're going to make these return empty strings because I need to fill them in soon. Def memory and def state. And so if we save this, oh, one more thing. If name is equal to main, so if we run this file directly, we're going to run it ourselves. I think that's all we need to do. And assuming that I am not just full of the crazies here, we're going to go into this. So ideally I would use a virtual end for this, but I use Flask enough. Not apt-get. Yeah, we'll do this properly. Or I've actually already done this. Bin activate. So we're using a virtual environment for it because it's just a little bit easier to keep track of packages that way. Oh. What? So I have a virtual environment already set up for the backend, but I didn't use Flask for it? That seems weird. Okay. I'll live with that. That seems really weird that I did part of the work, but not all the work. So if we come back over here, I should be able to go localhost. We have just an API. Go away. That's what we wanted to have. And so to explain what we're doing here, we have Flask. Flask is a Python library for, I guess, module. I think they technically call it a module. Doesn't matter too much. It's a Python thing to make simple websites. It is not designed for you to run on production hardware. There's a whole bunch of stuff. For example, I'm trying to think of how to do it now. I don't, off the top of my head, remember how to. Specifically, like if you trigger errors in Flask, you can definitely run into situations you don't want to, especially if debugging is enabled. They give you very nice things for prototypes that you should never, ever, ever, ever put on the internet. But so to answer Stefan's question, the reason I'm not using any of the Flask stuff is because eventually I want to use, oh, of course, this is not going to work right for me. Eventually, I want to use Zappa. And the reason for that is because And I haven't done this part yet. Hopefully this is in the near future though. The plan is for all of this to actually be serverless. And what that means is that I'm not going to run any of this on a server, but still put it up on the internet. So the claim here, and I've tested out that it kind of works. I don't know about any of the extension stuff, and I don't want to run too many risks. But what the claim here is that I can actually just take a Flask app, and say, turn this into AWS Lambdas, and it'll just work. So my hope here is that I can have all of this up and running, and basically it's just a static S3 bucket and a set of Lambdas that just works. But that's far down the line. For now, I am just making terrible prototypes, and we're making some progress here. So we did that, and I need to remember how to do this. I need to return JSON properly. So I actually just want to, do I return it as, look at that, Google. It turns out you do exactly what I want. So I want to do return JSONify state, and I want to do return JSONify adder. We've imported Flask. I also want to import JSONify. And we also need to accept an argument here. How do I do that again? Come on. That way is how I do that. So what we're doing here is we're telling Flask that we don't want, oops, this needs a name, that we don't just want dumps ID state. Like, that should not be the request. The request should look like dumps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Or I can't type, can I? Oh, I need to state. So I should also probably put a default there too, but why do you not work? Font a little bit bigger. Font is a little bit bigger now. Ugh. How do I redraw the screen in Vim? I thought it was Control L, and it turns out it is Control L, but I can't type Control L for some reason. So we now have more bigger texts, but this did not work. So dumps an ID state. Oh. One of the many problems here. I didn't redone it. Like, I didn't restart the server, so it's still running the old code. So we don't want to return state, we want to return s. S is equal to just a dictionary. And we're going to restart this. There's an argument to force it to restart itself, which I'm going to actually look up real quick. Restart on change. Okay, I can't do it if I'm running it the way that I am running it, can I? Oh, debug will do it for me. I can definitely use debug. Where's my other terminal? There's my other terminal. Debug is equal to true. True. You're having a problem with Flask. It can be seen on your machine, but it can't be seen by any other computer. My guess is that it's your firewall. I know, especially with Windows, like if you're using Windows, I had all sorts of problems getting it to work. Oh, I need to actually restart it too. I'm blanking here, through the firewall. In fact, I couldn't, if you're using WSL like I am, I could not get Python to have a firewall exception to run a server. I just couldn't get the Windows firewall to make the exception for me. And I'm not entirely sure why, but it was a huge pain. So, okay, before we go too far here, we have test, but we don't actually want test. So let's actually specify what we want. And the idea is that both of these are going to end up having stuff returned. So let's do one thing at a time here. We have an ID, which is ID. Set auto indent. Yeah, so if you're using WSL, you're probably not going to be able to get the firewall exception in place. The way I solved it, was by running Python in Windows, not in WSL. Because the Windows Python I was able to get an exception for. I couldn't get an exception for any of the Linux processes. But the Windows processes I can make an exception. And the way I ended up fixing it was that I just run Python in a command prompt for the server, and I run my editing in Vim in WSL. It's not necessarily the best way to do it, but it was a way that worked for me. Right now, I just don't care. I'm only going to be doing it locally, so that's good enough for me. So we have an ID. If we go back to our picture, so here's our picture again. We need to be able to have some disassembly, and we need to have some register state, and we're going to return our ID. But let's do this. Registers. It's going to be an array. Let's do racks, which is going to be 41414141. That's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Rip, which is going to be OX 6161616161616161. And let's do a stack pointer. And so there's no reason why I'm doing it this way. So the problem isn't an outgoing exception. The problem is that because I'm running a server, I need an incoming exception. And I couldn't find a way to give an incoming exception for a Linux process. I could do it for a Windows process, but not the processes running in WSL. So there might be a way to do it. I tried for a little while. It didn't work, and I just said, this is not worth my time. I have Python running on this machine on the Windows side too. I'm just going to use that. So we have registers like that. We also have a disassembly. And what is this going to look like? Let's see here. What am I doing? Let's not be silly. What crazy talk is this? Do I not have Binary Ninja set up on here? How? That's interesting. So what I was going to do here was I was going to disassemble a real process and actually take a look at it, but apparently I don't have Binary Ninja installed on here yet. For people who haven't been watching the streams, was it a month or two ago, I upgraded from my old computer to a new computer. And since then, I like to manually set up as much as possible because I find it helps me get rid of all the cruft crap that accumulates in PC as I use it over time. Like, I don't need 12 different versions of this software and all this other stuff. So I think about once a year, sometimes twice a year, I just start with a fresh install and I go from there. But at least right now, I don't have anything to disassemble with on this machine. I guess I have endosasm if I want it, but let's not go that route yet. So our disassembly is going to be the simplest disassembly ever, which is call RDI return. N, not M. Which means that we want RDI to be the same thing as RIP. This seems like a pretty plausible crash dump. Like, clearly this is not sufficient, but it gets me a little bit of the way there. So if I come in here, I should be able to refresh this, and it doesn't load. Invalid syntax on line 13. Really? Oh. Duh. I'm sitting here making a list with keys. That's just silly. How did I not realize that? Okay. And this looks reasonable. I don't like that it's giving me ID like that, because it's a string, but I'll live. Realistically, this is about what I want from that API. And for adder, I want mem, which is also going to be a list. We want our ID still. It's still going to be ID. Memory base 64. Oh, I'm gonna have to look this up, aren't I? We're gonna create another terminal here real quick. Normally I'd use screen, but for various reasons, I've had a lot of problems getting screen to work properly in WSL recently. I know there are fixes, I just haven't gotten around to actually implementing them. Ooh. Actually, let me check that real quick. Yeah, that's what I thought. So, one of the downsides to using virtual environments is that you have to actually use them all the time. So if you notice here, so my system Python is Python 2.7, and for this project we're using Python 3. And while they probably work okay, I want to make sure I get the right thing here, especially because I'm testing how something works. So import base64. I think I want base64 .encode, b64 encode. Oh no. Bytes like object. What? I feel like I'm being crazy here. What? Not string. Okay, Google, you have to tell me how to do this now. Base64 encode Python 3. Bytes like object. So can I just call bytes? Like, can I just do... Ugh. Okay. That I can live with. The things you learn about Python 3. So I need to do... Where are we going here? I want this one. base64.b64 encode bytes a times 1 page. UTF-8. That looks more or less good to me. And instead of that, we want memory 1. Ooh, got a crasher. I also want to do address adder. We want to return back what our address is too. So what is our error here? Base64 not defined. Import base64. Ta-da! Is not JSON serializable. Interesting. How about now? Weird. Wait, what? Like, I didn't want to repr it. JSONify bytes. That's not what I want at all. I'm producing a bytes object. I need to decode it to a string. Oh, that's me being dumb again. Well, I want to decode it as UTF-8. All right, because we're using modern Python now, we need to actually pass things around reasonably properly, and this looks decent. It's worth noting here that I'm going to have to figure out how to un-base64 encode these in JavaScript. I'm hoping that that's straightforward, but I don't actually know. We're going to have to Google for that one in a little bit. But that is a problem for future me. Current me just wrote a very, very, very simple API. So, before we go too far, let's actually do that real quick. No. Set no auto indent. Doop. And now that looks more or less like what I want to see. So all I did there was grabbed like Stefan suggested just some real disassembly, so it looks plausible. I do like how we have registers here that we're not defining up here. I think this is most of what we want. So this is just a very, very, very simple API for it. Because most of what we want to do today is actually get the interface side of things working. So I want to get the front end working, because the back end is mostly just going to be a pretty thin layer on top of a database, which That I understand how to do. The front end stuff is much more complicated, at least for me. Like, all this disassembly stuff is easy. It's trying to write JavaScript and CSS that's hard. So, where are we here? We have our server. Server seems good enough. That looks decent. Now for the fun part. So, we did all of this. I want to do create React app front end. So, what we are doing here is we're going to do some React. And because I don't actually understand how React works beyond tutorials, we're kind of going to like follow along. Okay, I think I'm good. Sorry, I took a drink there and it did not go down the way that I thought it would. Oh, this is very confidence inspiring that the buttons don't work all of a sudden here. I do like when I'm looking at a JavaScript framework, front-end framework, and stuff doesn't work the way that I think it should work. That's really confidence inspiring. So we have this. The other thing I want to do is I want to grab Bootstrap themes, right? Which one is it? Boot swatch. That's what I was looking for. I want... Which of these do I actually want to use? So if you're not familiar with it, Bootstrap is just very, very simple CSS that's pretty easy to work with. And I'm using it for exactly that reason. The problem is that the default Bootstrap, it looks decent. Like, it looks good and looks like it's intended to. It's just not exact, like, it looks really bland. So boot swatch, which is this URL right here, it's just a set of themes for it. So we've got this. I want to, you know what, we're just going to grab the min here because why not? Like, I'm not editing any of this. We're using defaults because defaults are good enough for me. It's not going to be the prettiest thing in the world, but it's going to work. Have you not finished yet? Kitty, I know you want attention, but not right now. Unfortunately, she likes to be loud when she feels she isn't getting attention. So that's the cat. I'm not quite sure if the microphone is picking it up. She's sitting outside the door. The door's open, by the way, into the office, meowing at me because I'm not paying attention to her. The joys of pet ownership. But once this comes down, we're going to replace the CSS that React uses by default. Well, before we do that, I'm going to actually show you what the default looks like. But, jeez. So this is darkly, like, it's nothing amazing. It's, like, it looks decent, though. And it looks, like, about what I want it to look like. So we're just going to go with this. And this is just, you know, examples of what everything looks like. Yes, kitty? But that looks good. Has this come down yet? No, we're still waiting on this. 2,500 milliseconds? That doesn't sound right. So, like I was saying at the beginning of the stream, the path to doing web development is vastly different than when I kind of understood it long ago. Now, for web development, you use one, possibly more package managers to do everything it is you're going to do. Because, you know, web development is real development, right? Just because I've never treated it like real development doesn't mean that it isn't real development. So I'm assuming that most of the people watching this are like me and understand like Python and C and assembly better than they do JavaScript. And so while I've been looking into this, it's been really interesting seeing how seriously a lot of the JavaScript developers take things. For one, it's actually kind of crazy to me how popular functional programming is in the JavaScript community. Like, for React, there's a very big push for things to be pure functional programs. Like, I'm actually kind of shocked that people who do JavaScript development are more serious about no side effects than developers in anything other than OCaml I've ever seen. To be fair, like, that has always been kind of like a completely uneducated assumption that I've made, that, oh, you're a JavaScript developer, like, you kind of just hack things together, right? But no, they're actually very serious developers, and like configuration management and package managers and everything, and like it makes sense that that's the way things are done. It's just not the way that I thought they were done. So we've pulled this down. We have everything here. We go into the source directory. We have stuff. I should be able to copy. Nope, too far. This in here, and I want to modify this one, I think. Yeah. Bootstrap.min.css, and then I want to do React start? No. Okay, I have to look this back up again. Not this tab? This tab. Yes, this tab. I want to do npm start, of course, because you start with your package manager, I guess? Guess that's a thing. Cannot build. What did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? Oh no. So I created it. What did I do wrong here? So I installed Node. I did npm install. I created my app. Huh? Cannot find model inference. Okay. So for bitcode, this is what I use. So this is it's just a registry change. So I like the solarized dark. You can just what is it? This registry setting, you download it and run it, and it's going to change your console to look like this. It's really simple. I find the default Windows console completely unreadable. So I'm colorblind, so certain colors don't look even worse to me than they do for most people. But in particular, the blue on black of the default Windows command line, I can't even read it. Like, I can't even tell that it's text most of the time. So I have to do this, or I just can't do anything. Task kill. Man, that's a little awkward. So for people who don't switch between OSs frequently, so I'm trying to kill the npm process here, and because I'm on Windows, I was going, oh, task kill. That's how you kill a process on Windows, right? Right, but I'm on Linux on Windows, and I need to use kill instead. Confusing. While we're at it, let's kill all node. Kill all -9 node. Okay. So, why is this failing? Okay. Cannot find model inference. What does Google have to say about this? This is the joys of trying to do this all live, that I've never seen this error before. Of course. So okay. What? Cannot find module inference? What am I doing wrong here? Okay, you know what? Let's start over. I'm very glad that RF with no argument doesn't do anything. That would have been bad. Whoops. Whoops, dealio. Okay, let's try this again. So we're going to create React app front, calling it something different just in case like Effie might be some magic character and that's causing weirdness because of that. So we're going to install this again. So Bitcode, I'm happy to help out. If you have any questions like that, feel free to ask. And while we're waiting, sure. So yes, I play CTF relatively frequently. I haven't since HitCon, but that hasn't been that long. It's been a few weeks. I've been a little bit too busy to do much. I think this is where I'm going to feel dumb. So is CTF time down? I'm kind of shocked. Oh, there it goes. Just very slow. Am I trying to hack you? No. No, I did not try Flare on. It was on the list of things that I wanted to try. I just ended up being a little bit too busy to do much of anything. But what I was going to say is HitCon was the last one I played. SecCon is coming up soon. I think it actually is either this weekend or next weekend, and I'm definitely going to try and play in that. Typically, I tend to do a lot of the binaries type things. Most of the time what I do are... Why did IE load? Oh, how nice. I guess that's good. I'm actually really confused about this. Apparently, the Linux React, like Node on Linux, was still able to start a IE window for me. Which I guess makes sense, because they probably just pushed out, here's the URL, go open it with whatever app is default, and I guess IE is default, but... this is all a very roundabout way of saying, while I get distracted. When it comes to CTFs, I usually do a lot of reversing and the binary exploitation stuff. As far as our team goes, one of our big weak areas is crypto. So the basics of crypto stuff I tend to do. Same with some of the web stuff. We're not. One of our guys is pretty good at web exploitation, but he's not always around. And when he's not, I try and pick up a little bit of that slack. For the most part, I've been playing CTF now for. Let me see here. So when CodeGate comes around, it will have been 8 years now. Because I think CodeGate 2010 was the first CTF I played in. And since then, it has just sucked up so very, very, very much time. So that worked okay. So the reason I didn't want to... Why is that failing? Like, this is supposed to... I installed Nodejs. I did my npm install. Why is that not sufficient? So my understanding was that I do npm install -g create React app, and that this should install all the requisites I need, right? Okay. Well, this is odd. So I'm hoping that Adler is right and I'm just being dumb here, but... So I create React app, my app. I'm not deleting it because I'm going to work off that. I then... Maybe I'm just a crazy person. Nope. Okay. I have a recent version of Node.js installed, right? I've the latest version of Node installed. I did npm install that. That worked fine. I did create React app. That worked okay. Why is that failing? I don't care about syntax highlighting. Like, it'd be nice eventually. Yeah, so what it's saying to do is it wants you to remove everything and then start with a very slimmed down test application, which I don't think it's necessary. Like, it makes sense that it's doing it. Like, I'm missing dependencies and I don't understand how that's happening. I'd like to say, I think I'm doing a great job right now of selling you that if you don't know it, you should go learn React. Okay, I did this last night and it worked, which is why I'm so confused. I created it. I went into it. I'm not going to delete it because I just replace it with the exact same code. You know what? We're just going to do that real quick. Oops. Try React 15. So it's a good question, but how do I actually check that? Yeah, so I was hoping to use the latest version of React, just because the latest thing is always better, right? Is this relevant? See this? I don't think so. Like, I think this is just it's not, it's not setting up it's not installing what I need it to install for some reason. Okay. I have Node 9.2. That's installed. Let's do npm install React. Is this going to work? So it's like this some like weird craziness that I thought the entire point of doing this with npm was that I didn't need to worry about these dependencies. But I don't know. Let's give this a try. I mean, what's the worst that happens? I have a slight setback and have to try again in 30 seconds. npm start. Ow. Yeah, so I'd like to avoid switching to that. Not for good reasons or anything. Really, I am thrilled that a version of No, I did this last night at like 8 p.m. and I had it working on my other machine. So I probably had 16.2 there too. React DOM, React scripts. Okay. Let's try this again. So let's look at what this looks like. So I have my folders. If I start it, it should work. How does this... sudo. Okay. Did that as root. Let's pull this down again and see if this works. Like I did this last night and this worked, and it's really, really annoying that this is now not working. It's always the worst, right? So I took some time last night because I'm still not entirely comfortable with the whole React stuff. Like, I've watched a ton of tutorials on how to do it and worked through I worked through some tutorials. Last night, I built everything on my laptop, got it working, got a really, really simple version of a lot of this stuff working, and it worked fine. Like, at least as far as we've gotten so far, everything just worked. And yet, less than 24 hours later, and to be fair, on a different machine, but with more or less the same setup, nope, not gonna work. So, installed React, React DOM, and React scripts. That sounds perfectly fine to me. Like, we have the right version of Node, we have reasonably modern NPM, right? It's whatever came with it. How do I know what the current version? The current version is... How do I check this? Stable release is 5.4. Yeah, there's something to be said for demos failing. I do have to say, so this right here, and yeah, okay, so the chat isn't blocking too much of it. This is one of the weirder things about modern web development that, so I'm using Node.js, I'm using React. Gulp is something else that I don't actually know what it is. JavaScript toolkit by Fractal Innovations for a build system. So it's a build system written in JavaScript, and then Bower and Webpack are package managers. And that's so weird to me that you would use npm to install Webpack to manage packages for your JavaScript front end. That's crazy to me, that you're using two different package managers to even get anywhere at all. Okay, cannot find module, what? My app node module. What? Okay, you know what? Let's try this again. So unfortunately, I built this from source, which is clearly my first mistake. But this... So what I'm doing here is I'm resetting up all the node stuff to make sure that it's using the version I built from source. Just in case I mess something up on accident, let's use the versions that were there, that I built. These are modern, I know these work. Well, I thought they worked, but users, streaming, always be fuzzing, front end, my app, npm, start. Why? So, to answer your question, you don't need it, but if you want to do and I'm sure somebody will correct me here, but my understanding is that when it comes to modern web development, nobody actually writes raw JavaScript anymore. That writing like JavaScript directly, like the stuff that's actually going to be run in somebody's browser, is akin to somebody writing assembly, like raw assembly now. Like, you just don't do that. Why would you do that? That's silly. Instead, people write something slightly higher level, like, what is it? ECMAScript 6 is the latest version, and they compile. So they write something that looks like JavaScript. They then compile it into something that's actually JavaScript, and they use that then as actually doing stuff. So I'm sure there are exceptions. I know people who write raw assembly, but it's pretty uncommon. Okay, so here's our error message. We used Node 9.2, and that... This is quite possibly the strangest version number ever. Sure, compiled TypeScript. I don't. There are probably people who understand this stuff much better than me. By which I mean there are probably people in this chat who understand it much better than I do. None of this makes any sense to me. The JS left pad apocalypse. I have no idea what that means. JS left pad. What? Okay. But yes, modern web development, nothing like how I thought it worked. Turns out is much like modern web development looks a lot more like writing C to me than anything else. Like, I write in one language, it gets compiled into something that is barely the same, and then that actually gets run. And I'll write something in React or Angular or Vue or something like that. It'll get it compiled down to this minimized, completely unreadable thing that's technically JavaScript, and then that actually gets run in the browser. Like, that does feel very similar, and like the package managers and things like that, like, it feels a lot closer to what I consider development than how I thought any of this stuff worked. Fortunately, apparently none of this works. Really confidence inspiring, I know. So we had all of this. It should just work. Again, it's really confidence inspiring that the take the tutorial thing that looks like a button or the get started thing that looks like a button, neither of those do anything. And I'm using a, like, normal release Chrome. What? Good. I apparently don't have an ad blocker installed in this profile. Programmers were left staring at broken builds and failed installations on Tuesday after somebody toppled the Jenga tower of JavaScript. That is definitely what it feels like. Oh, that's nice. I do. Unfortunately, one of those dependencies was left pad. The code is below. It pads out the left-hand side of strings with zeros or spaces. Okay. Ha! Oh, it is awful. This actually sounds a lot like the Ethereum situation that happened recently. So, what was it? Not initialized. So, was this it? Yeah, there are better. I have no idea where the better article about it is. Basically, what was it? 3 weeks ago, somebody there was a Ethereum library, which is actually just another contract that people like. In Ethereum, for a library, you have like, here's a contract that's out in the blockchain, and then my contract will make calls into that, and that for various reasons that can be much cheaper than publishing your own code. So this was a thing that was out there, and for parity, their library was never initialized properly, so somebody was able to just destroy it, which is kind of hilarious. Oh, package management. It's so crazy. I need to have node greater than 6. I have node greater than 6. So back to this. I created an app. That worked. I CD'd into it. That worked. npm start. That failed. Come on. Oh. What if... Create React app frontend. So what I'm curious about here and what I'm testing, I notice that this is a relatively long path name. mntc user streaming always be fuzzing frontend my app, and then node modules inquirer lib prompts list ... util. That's a long path name. What if it's too long of a path name? Like, what if because I'm like, someplace there's a 256 byte path limit, and that because I'm going from Windows to Linux to Windows, at some point it's getting truncated and just failing because of it. What if? And saying that, I think when I tried this on the other one, I actually put it in the Linux home directory. I definitely had a smaller username, because on my laptop, it's just Sam. None of this streaming stuff. Why would I stream from my laptop? That is, of course, because I spent 3 or 4 months streaming exclusively from my laptop. Why I say that. For people who weren't around to watch all of that, so when I first started streaming last February, it was pretty exclusively some of the CTF stuff. Like, I'd play in a CTF, and then we'd do a stream going through some of the challenges that I liked from that CTF. And at the time, the only machine I had that was set up even remotely close to being able to go through a CTF binary, like that had working GDB and even a Linux install at all, was my laptop that I played all my CTF on. But I think after a month or two of that, that stopped. It was too much of a pain to stream from a laptop with only one screen. Like, trying to stream with only one screen is incredibly painful. Like, At this point, I use 2.5 screens, and even then, I sometimes feel like I run out of space. The setup I have here is what we have right here is the middle monitor in my 3-monitor setup. On the left screen right now, I have a Chrome tab or a Chrome window open with like researchy stuff, and then I also have the chat open there. On the right screen, I have OBS open, which is actually doing all the streaming. But because of how I have the mic positioned, I can't see the right screen particularly well. It's there, and if I move my head around, I can see it fine, but just looking over, I can't actually see much of anything. The the pop filter blocks out most of my vision for it. So we have this cd frontend npm start. Oh no. Oh no 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 no. Oh no 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 no. I just want to say how much I absolutely hate that I was correct about that. Just to verify here, because I find it hard to believe that this is actually a true thing that just happened. Frontend FE Oh, I hate this so much. Okay, so and now we know. Okay. So, note to self, I want to track down what exactly is happening there, because that is quite possibly the worst thing I've ever seen. But we're here, it works. So I guess we can get back to actually doing something halfway useful. Users streaming. Wait a minute. What's the order for this? I do ln-s, there's the target with the, create a link to target with name. Okay. Move frontend ln-s /mnt c users streaming always be fuzzing frontend. Okay. Oh, oops. That's not what I wanted at all. I accidentally hit Control D there, which closes the terminal you're currently in. Okay, so I cannot run this off the Windows partition or the Windows half of stuff for some reason. I guess we're just going to have to live with that. So we have this. Yay, we have this. Let's also start up another terminal, and let's actually run this thing. What am I doing? npm start. Except we're not going to use this. We're going to use Chrome because Edge I can't use. Not for good reasons. I just don't understand Edge, and supposedly, at least, there's a whole bunch of cool developer tools that you can use with React that don't work in Edge. They do work in Chrome, and they work by default. Right? By default. Oh, no. There's a big plugin or something? I don't know. There's something you can do that when we run into errors, I'm going to set up properly to do developer tools with React, and it's awesome. At least that's what the internet tells me. It tells me it's the best thing that I've ever seen. We also need to copy, so we wanted to see users streaming, fuzzing this. We're going to do index.js. We're going to get, actually, let's not do it there. We're going to do it app.js. We want to grab bootstrap.min.css. And if we come back over here, well, that's larger than I expected it to be. But, you know what? It works. I'm not going to worry too much about it. So, we have this. What do we... So, Nikos, I answered that a little bit earlier. The setup I have here is I use what's called WSL. It's the Windows subsystem for Linux, which is a very lightweight Ubuntu VM running in Hyper-V that integrates directly with your Windows install. So I'm running Windows 10 as my host, and then I use WSL for most stuff. And then I have real thick Hyper-V VMs if I ever need to do anything more major than I can do in WSL. It's the basic setup that I use. I actually find it incredibly useful. It's definitely something that I use as much as possible. So, we have this. What do we need to do here? So, we have a header. I don't think I care about this header. We have a div, which is our app, which I think is reasonable. Where did our paint get to? So here's our paint. So we actually do want the header, don't we? So we want a header. We then want two different divs. Div. How do I do this again? So I want div 1. That is not the right way to do this, is it? What is the right way to do this? So the entire point of React is that rather than writing a whole bunch of CSS and JavaScript, I can write components. And that components are good to like the magic functional JavaScript stuff that should just work. Let's see here. I had this. We're going to pull this back over here so that I can try and catch up as I go. So I have this. What do I want to do? Let's actually. Sorry. I'm now trying to catch up and remember things that I've done once before. So, not once, but a very small number of times. So, the way they do it is they're going to return a... Okay, so they do put a div around it. That's good. So, div... what do I want to actually call this? So we have the main app, we have a header, and then below that we're going to have, and if we take a look at our graphic, just call it detail. What? Set tab stop. So I'm setting it to 2 here just so that it, like, I'm going to have a bunch of indentation and I want to have it a little bit easier to read. Oh, I guess let's... Wait, is it really using spaces here? Of course you are. Oh, Vim. Vim is actually really difficult to use if you're just using the defaults for some reason. So we have a div, that's our detail, and we want to just render our detail. Right? So we have a base class, which is just super simple. It's the detail. We need to then have in our detail, detail extends component. It has a render. Come on, there's a render function in it. And this is just going to return. So what is this going to return? So this is going to return a bunch of stuff, isn't it? Set auto indent. Sorry, I am fixing my vimrc real quick. Set auto indent set new. Okay, much better. This looks much more like what I want to see. So we're going to return this, and then I want in detail, we've got 3 divs. Which is going to have class name is equal to memory. Disassembly. And this is going to be registers. So we have those 3. Let's look up the Bootstrap part of this. So if I want to have, how do I do columns properly? Layout? So I want the class Sorry. Let's just save this for a second and see where we are. So we have this, and we are failing. Must be wrapped in an enclosing tag. Okay. Disassembly register. That is not at all what I want to see. So we have this. We want to actually put something in our header though. So what did we say we were going to have in our paint document? Fuzzer front end crash analysis. Yay! This doesn't look good at all. So we have grid options. So So if I do that, what happens? Div class name. So this is a little bit confusing because like the CSS says, ooh, that looks more or less what I want it to look like. So I've got a box for memory, I've got a box for disassembly, and I've got a box for registers. Okay, getting there. So that's laid out halfway decently. I want underneath this, we need other stuff though. Do you want underneath all of it? Sure. Oh no, there will be no tables here. This is as much as I'm getting to. Exploitable, not exploitable. I don't know, maybe. Ooh, shiny. Okay, all that looks okay. Except instead of these being things like that, they're going to be disassembly / registers / memory. Except that's going to crash on me now. I need div with container class and then divs with bootstrap classes. Yeah, that's more or less what I have. It's a little bit not that. I need a div with a container class. I have a container class. I have rows. I'm not specifying the size because I don't know if I need to. Like I'm okay with just trusting it to do its own thing. Because oh, I need to actually finish this before I do much. Memory extends component render return memory. I'm going to yank that. Disassembly, and then this one we're going to turn from memory into registers. Ta-da! Oh. Disassembly. What? Where'd my text go? Oh. Yay! We have text again. Okay. So these are getting closer to what we want them to look like, except I need to do some bootstrapping here. So I want these not to be just empty boxes. I want them to look like stuff. Hey, tables are hard. Oh, you know what? I should also pull this over here so that people can read along with me. So I think a Jumbotron is what I want. Class is equal to a Jumbotron. Sure. So instead of returning registers, I want to return class name is equal to Jumbotron. Oh, and we should wrap this in parens, because that's how you do this stuff now. Registers / div. You know what? We're just copying and pasting this again. Registers memory. Registers / disassembly. Container. Oh. Huh. Man, that is embarrassing. Ooh. Look at this. This is getting decent. So like these now look like things. We need to make these buttons now. So ooh, what's a button group? Ooh. Grab a series of buttons with button in a button group. So if I make all of those a button group and then a series of buttons, I can do that. So we don't want that. We want these to be a div class name is equal to button dash group. Button type is equal to button. Don't think I care. Oh, I guess I do care about that, don't I? Exploitable. Wow. Okay, this is getting there. I'm kind of okay with how this looks. I'm not thrilled that this stuff doesn't line up, but why doesn't this line up? Like, why does that not line up with that? That is something we will fix later. But I also want a header, right? Wait, why don't I also look at this like... So I went to boot swatch darkly. So I want this thing. How do I get this thing? So it's a nav, it's a collapse nav bar. So it is a nav bar. Ooh, I can get tabs too. Ooh. Maybe tabs is what I want. Is it worth rethinking this a little bit? Do I want tabs? I don't think I want tabs. I do want tabs here though, right? Like being able to have like keeping track of memory there would be nice. Let's keep that in mind. Nav bar, that's what I want, isn't it? So, is it a class? No. It is a class. Okay, so I do nav, class name is equal to nav bar. Okay. So up here in my header, I want div, no, nav, is that right? I want nav class is equal to navbar. Class name is equal to navbar. Is that not sufficient? Hmm. Hmm. Why didn't this work? Because this does not look like what I want it to look like. We've a div class BS component. Okay, I don't really care about that. Do I care about that? Is that what this thing does? The BS component part? Yep, screw it. We're just doing this. Yunk. Oh no! That's not what I wanted at all. I want that part. Whoop. Ugh. Now I have to get rid of all the classes. You need the div with nav classes. It's not nav, but div. Okay. Why is this failing still? Okay, let's go back to the top here. How it works. Here's what you need to know before getting started with it. Navbars require wrapping navbar with navbar expand for responsive, collapsing, and color scheme classes. Navbars and their contents are fluid by default. Use optional containers to limit their horizontal width. Use our spacing and flex utility classes. They're responsive by default, but you can easily modify them to change that. Navbars are hidden by default when printing. Force them to be printed by adding .dprint. Ensure accessibility when using a nav element, or if using a more generic element such as div. Like, I feel like this should just work, right? Okay, you know what? We're going to do this too. Class header extends component render return that. Ooh. Render return close that, close that. Okay. So that works. Well, it does more or less what I expect it to do. And I would expect if I copy and paste this, that it will also do more or less what I want. Right, so I want to highlight all of this. Line 31. I didn't do any. What did I do differently? Okay. Not sure I care. So we have this. It's not a nav bar. It is, what do I call this? Always be fuzzing. Dope. And it's not going to go home. It's going to be crash, dump. Sure, that looks good. Okay. This is getting closer to what I want it to look like. So we have this. Our memory class is not that simple, though. So memory, we said, has this, but it also has this go-to memory area. So we're going to have this. Let's go back and see how jumbotrons work. So, for example, of a jumbotron in here. So, tables, I don't care about tables. We have all sorts of fancy navigation stuff. Don't care about indicators, containers. So, we have a title for a jumbotron. What does a button look like? Okay. This is more or less what I want it to look like. They just put a button at the bottom of it. I'll put a button at the bottom of it. Also cards, if I want to do a card. But yeah, let's just stick with that. So I just want a button. Oh, and I want to make these large buttons, don't I? So if I go back over here, I have buttons, and I want primary. Designed to be used with the button element. However, you can also use them on an A or input. Outline buttons are not what I want. I do have a button large though, so I can be button large. So button. Yes, I've now said buttons so many times that it means almost nothing in my head. So we did this, and now we have, yeah, that's looking decent. Really bothering me, like this right here not lining up with this is really starting to bother me. Is there anything I can do about that? I definitely need to fix that at some point, but I think for now I can live with it. So how do I want this to look? It's an input add-on. So if we come into here, I want like an input group. Is that what I'm looking for? want something really simple here. I don't want a full button. I kind of want it combined. What do they explain doing that? Can you host pwnable challenges on Heroku? Maybe. So I'm not that familiar with Heroku. I've used it once or twice, but that was back when I was writing Ruby, and I haven't done that in a long time. For the most part, I stick with AWS for everything, and I definitely do use AWS for hosting CTF challenges. For Heroku, though, I wouldn't be the person to ask. Anytime I have any sort of like questions like that kind of stuff, I kind of just punt it to somebody else. I'm sorry, I can't really help about Heroku questions. But good luck. Okay, we're gonna look this up real quick. So, input group add-on, basic add-on 2. Okay, so if I do that, that should be more or less what I want. I want like a div class input. Can I do just an input? Well, let's try it and see. Div class name is equal to type is equal to text. Form control? Do I need to call it form control? Input type class is equal to form control. I guess I do need to call it form control. That's that. Anything else that I care about in here? Not really. I have to close it, right? I do not have to close an input. But then I want to do a span. And a span. Where'd it go? Okay. Input type text. So I want to do that. Except I don't want it to be that. I want it to be... What was the right syntax for a button again? I want that. That. Does this work? Oh. Oh. That's not what I want at all. Why isn't that working? Do I have to do a input group? Yep, look at that. Ah. Yeah, that looks pretty reasonable. How do I default that now? Oh no! Input is a void element tag. How do I do this right? Placeholder, not default. Okay. So that looks more or less like what I want it to look like. We're getting there. So for the most part, this is doing stuff. The trick is that we don't want it to just look decent. We need it to actually do something. Value, I can use value. There we go. Okay. So we currently have it doing this. We need to actually fetch data though. And the way you do that is we need to go back to, oh, not this one, this one. We need to go back to the React stuff. So we have a pretty simple layout. Where did that come from? We need to go grab ourselves. So in order to update stuff, and so I'm trying to think through how we actually do this. And the way that we do this is that each of these components accepts data. They don't just live by themselves and do nothing. They have to a component. So what we did here is we made up a whole bunch of components. We have a header component, we have a memory component, we have a disassembly component, we have a registers component, and then I think these are just part of our app, right? So we have a detail, so we have a header and detail, and then detail has buttons in it. Yeah. Okay. Oh, is that going to make it line up? So if I do div class name is equal to call it helps if I close tags, doesn't it? Yeah, look at that. Now they line up, and now it does not bother me quite as much. So that does all of that. How do I make sure that these all line up in terms of how much data is in them? Can I do that? Do I want to do that? I don't know if I want to do that. Yeah, I'm not convinced I want it to line up like that, because I think this might actually look better. But what we're saying is that we have this. We now need it to accept external data. And the way we do that is that, let's go through the tutorial and make sure I'm not just lying about all of this. So the way they do this here in this tutorial is they made this nice little box, and each of the boxes is a component. And so they make it be the value that is in it, which does this. So basically they pass in a value and then they set the state to be that value, which works, but it's not perfect. So if I make my detail hold the state, which I think is reasonable, so detail is then going to return the thing we want. And that's going to do it right. So in order for this to work, we need to set up state in our detail. I'm just going to copy this in because I'm pretty sure it's the same. And so in order to set up state, you have to have a constructor to set a default for it. So we want this dot ID is equal to 1, 2, 3, 4. Is there any other, well, do I need to call it state? I think I have to call it state. Is equal to, and this is a dictionary. And I want, what do I want to call this? ID is equal to that. Is this valid JavaScript now? Yeah, it looks like it's working. So we did that. Do we want to display what our ID is anywhere? I don't think it matters, does it? No. So we have this, and now we want to pass in registers. Trying to remember how to do this again. So they made a little square for it, and if registers has a list of registers, I want it to just take that dictionary and dump them all out for me in a relatively reasonable format, right? So how do I actually want that to look? Do I like this look? I guess I use cards, but I think a list group is what I want. Because I think it looks pretty reasonable for what I'm looking for. So don't want events. Ideally, I want a label for these. Definitely don't want that. Not pagination. Okay, Bootstrap list group with label. It's going to give me an example. I hope this is going to give me an example. An example would be nice. I guess that's one way to do it, right? So they're doing a badge for it. I guess that's one way to do it. How do badges look? Whoa. Why are you freaking out? I don't know if you can actually hear that. All of a sudden, one of the fans just kicked on really loud. Like, ideally what I want is I want it to look like this. Can I just do that? Okay, first question. What do we just call these? A list group. How did we make those work? So we had a button, and then we had a input group add-on. List group add-on? Is that a thing? I don't want a glyph. I mean, I guess a badge doesn't look too bad for it. How do I pull it left? Is there a way to pull left? Bootstrap badge left. Oh, pull left. Okay. So, for registers. So in order for this to work, I need to, I want to accept an argument to registers. And the way that I do that is so disassembly shouldn't have, so I don't need a class. I can just make it a function. It's going to accept registers. It needs to accept regs. Does not need a render function anymore. And now so I need to actually pass it something, don't I? So we have registers, and I say regs is equal to brax 1, 2, 3, 4. Is that not the right way to do that? Back to the top here. So they moved state up. Square has a value that gets passed in. Do I have to call it value? Is that the problem? I do have to call it value. Maybe. JavaScript dictionary. Nope. My syntax looks right, right? So I want to come up here. I want to say const regs is equal to rex 1, 2, 3, 4. Should be either an expression or quoted JSX text. Value is equal. Oh, was I not supposed to do that? I was not supposed to do that, was I? Oh, that's why. Class registers extends component. We're switching back to this. There is a way to do it that doesn't use this, but I don't remember how to do it. As we have this, we have a constructor which why is this so complicated right now? So that's a function. Function registers, accepts one argument. What am I doing wrong? So we have board here. We have a render square, which gives me a square value is equal to That is me being dumb. So this is JSX, right? So it's kind of JavaScript, but not really. It's lying to you. In order for me to use the variable, which is this registers dictionary up here, I have to put it in curly braces down there. So, I want to have a JavaScript iterate dictionary. It would help if I could actually spell dictionary. So I want to do a map. How do I use map? I can just use for. It's not the best way to do it, but var key in dictionary. Reg val in props dot regs how do I do this properly? Oh, I want to. How do I do this properly? So the way they do it, we render it. They call it in each one. Okay, that's the way to do it. If I don't want that, I want to say for everything in this list, do a thing, and I want you to render it. How do I do that? They do that down here with the history. So they map it onto that. Okay, I can do that. Okay. I was a little bit concerned about this. So I woke up this morning feeling kind of congested, and there's been a cold going around the office. And as I've been talking, I've gotten slow, like my throat has been slowly getting tighter. And I think at this point, if I want to be able to talk at all tomorrow, I need to call it pretty soon. I'm starting to really feel my voice start to go. So I think at this point, we've been going for about 2.5 hours. Hopefully everybody enjoyed this, but I think unfortunately I'm gonna have to call it an evening for the stream right about now. I can't keep talking like this for another hour. I was hoping I'd be able to. So hopefully people enjoyed this. This has been very different from the normal streams that I've been doing. But as you can see, like we're starting to get something that looks like this looks relatively modern. We have about half of a layout set up now. We need to do the other half, which is actually going to go talk to our API and pull these values out. Once we do that, then we'll be in a good place to actually do something with it. We're gonna have to hook this backend up to something real, but at that point, it should work pretty well. So in any case, thanks everybody for tuning in. Hopefully you enjoyed this. I guess next week we're going to continue on in the same vein, try and get some more progress into this. Hopefully next week we'll be able to finish this. I don't want this to take too much longer. I'd like to get this finished up soon, get the other side of it to actually upload a crash dump working, and then get that all pushed out. Hopefully within 2, maybe 3 weeks. So we can start working on the more interesting part, which is going to be, so once we have the crash analysis stuff working, I need to get the fuzzer back up and running so that it's actually feeding crash dumps into this. So that so for people who haven't been watching this for the entire time I've been working on it, my goal here is that I want to have a fuzzer running all the time. And I want people to be able to, 1, watch the fuzzer run, and 2, be able to interact with it to make it better. And this right here is the first stage in that. For every crash, I want a human to be able to take a look at it and say, yes, this is exploitable, no, it's not, or I don't know. And that's just the first stage of that. The next stage is to actually help them interact with the fuzzer. The best example I have is back when we did the Python language fuzzing. We were actually fuzzing the NumPy module in Python. This was back in the July timeframe. There's a playlist on my YouTube channel if you want to go watch it. One of the things that came up frequently is that the fuzzer generated 20 lines of Python that did a thing, but somebody who's watching it, like I'm going through trying to triage what's going on with these crashes, and a viewer is able to take a look at that and say, oh, here is a single line of Python that does the same thing. Like, we're talking 95% reduction in our input, trivially, by just a human looking at it and saying, oh, clearly this is the equivalent thing. So the next thing I want to do is I want to have a fuzzer set up where, for interesting inputs, for whatever interesting it is, let humans go through those and try and minimize them. And then let that feed back in and hopefully get to more interesting results. That's going to be part 2. Just going to put a little box right here. And then part 3 is I want to start going into some code coverage stuff. One of the things that computers are good at is trying lots and lots of things. They're not as good at trying things that they like. Computers can try random things forever. They can't try new things that they've never tried before, except for randomly. So if you're trying to get down like a rare path in a program, a fuzzer might not be able to do that very easily. One of the solutions a lot of people have come up with, and that works to varying degrees of success, is using SMT solvers to say, here are all the constraints to get down a path, here's how you get down it. One thing I'd like to play with, though, is just kick those back to a human. Like, let a person specify how to get there. And hopefully, that's pretty easy to do. And hopefully it's pretty easy for a person to do it, too. If we can present all the right information, it should be pretty easy. So I've got a few other ideas like that. That on its own, like those things on their own are going to take quite a while to get built. But I think ideally the next probably couple months worth of streaming is going to be building what I want to do. Like I want to pair humans with a fuzzer and try and get them doing something useful, because I think that's interesting. There's a lot of things that computers are very, very, very bad at. There's a lot of things that humans are very, very bad at, and they're not the same thing. The better we can like make those two things mesh up together, the better. And that's the hope with all this. So hopefully this in particular has been helpful to people. This stream right now, because web development for modern systems is completely foreign to me. And it's something I've wanted to learn more about for a while. So having this to take and actually take a stab at has been pretty good. Hopefully other people found this useful. It's going to be the next couple streams, regardless of how useful people thought it was. But hopefully, like me, it's going to be useful to you somehow, or at least be interesting. So, like I said, everybody, it's been nice having everybody. The plan is same bat time, same bat channel. It's the right saying, right? Next Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern is about when I plan to go live. Typically, I start whenever Ginvale finishes or thereabouts. He targets ending at around 4. Sometimes it's a little bit under, sometimes it's a little bit over. And my expectation is to go on whenever he finishes or at 4, whichever is earlier. So if he's going till like 5 p.m. for some reason, I'll probably go on while he's still going. If he ends at 4:30 or 3:30, as long as I'm ready to go, which it's kind of a coin toss recently. I'll get started a little bit early. But like I said, everybody, thanks for having you, and I will see all of you next week. Bye, everybody.